Got it. Good morning, everyone. So we have a little bit of a different setting here around us today, as there's a dart ball tournament, which is happening later on today. So they've kind of got everything preset for that, and we had them leave up some tables and chairs for us. So I had no idea what dart ball was prior to getting out here. The short explanation is that it's baseball played with darts, which sounds pretty exciting and dangerous. But if you can envision it, they're throwing darts not at a traditional dart board, but as a baseball diamond, and so you will get points based on where you hit. So they have invited me to play. I do not think they want me to play. In fact, I don't see that going well. But so things are a little bit different there. Hopefully, we do actually have the sound working today for the folks online. So I think we finally got that resolved, and we've got extra batteries. So thank you, Bob. Immediately they were here. That is excellent. So we are going to continue with our journey through Mark's gospel, and so we're in Mark chapter 5 today. We'll start there. So Pastor Rich told me you guys got through the part of Mark 5 with the man possessed by demons, by the legion of demons there. And so now we're going to move beyond to he said you did read Mark 5 with 21 there, but we're going to kind of get into that today. So Mark 5:21 will be our start. But before we do that, let's pray. God of grace, we thank you that you come to be with us in this life. We thank you that you're with us now, that you speak your word. We pray that you would guide us as we hear from your word, as we see your love, your compassion at work in healing, driving out the brokenness from among us, and taking compassion even for the least of these. Bring us together as your people, Lord, and send us in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so like we've seen some points previously in Mark's gospel as we've been going through this, Mark does this kind of thing where he will switch tenses. So if you remember that, there are certain things where he is speaking and retelling the story in present tense as opposed to past, as opposed to like, this happened, this happened, this happened. So, well, no, this guy comes and he does this. So kind of drawing emphasis. So we're going to see that actually as we get into it today, starting with Mark 25. So we have a couple of things that are going to be happening in this first thing we're going to probably spend most of our time on here. This parallel series, or a series of interwoven episodes that happen. So Mark 25, verse 21. Jumping way into the future there. That's some bonus chapters in Mark. So Jesus, we know, was just over where? He was on the other side. He was over in the east. He was in the east, in the land of the Gerasenes. And after, if you remember, after he had healed the man, after they were leaving, and Jesus talks to the guy, because this guy who's been healed, he wants what? He wants to come along. He wants to go with Jesus and disciples, because where are they heading? They're heading back over to the east. They're heading back over to the west. Sorry, the west side of the Sea of Galilee. But Jesus tells him, no, do what? Go and tell what God has done for you. What was different about that? Jesus telling this guy, go and tell. In the rest of Mark's gospel, right? From what we've been seeing, Jesus says what? Don't tell. Say nothing to anyone. But why does he say that when he's over on the east side of the sea? They're Gentiles. They're the people that don't have these kind of misconceptions about what the Messiah was supposed to be, what God is doing. So there he says, go and tell. But now, okay, so now we got that. Now Jesus and his disciples, they head back over to the western side, back into the Jewish territories on the western side of the Sea of Galilee. So Jesus passes over in his boat, again, over to the far side, over to the west side there, and a great crowd, a numerous crowd gathered to him, and he's there beside the sea. So what does that say right there? what's the reaction that Jesus has been having whenever he's been in the Jewish territories? Crowds, lots of people come. Lots of people come because they've heard about him. They've heard what he can do. And so they're and this is going to be a thing we're going to hearing about today. They're coming up on him so that they're crowding around. They're pressing in on him. And what does Jesus have? I think we talked about this one before, right? He's got the boat out in the sea, so he can be out there. But so he's not there right now. He's coming up. He's on the shore. They're beside the lake, and he's going to be heading into town. And then something happens. One of the synagogue rulers. What's the synagogue? It's like the Jewish place of worship, right? So where you have 10 or more Jewish men, Jewish male adults in an area, then you could have a synagogue. You'd have this place for worship where they would come together, kind of like what we have in our liturgy. There'd be a time for the reading of the scriptures. There'd be a time for teaching. There'd be singing, psalms, hymns of praise. So the leaders of the synagogue here, which we're going to be hearing about. So the leaders of the synagogue were usually the Pharisees. They were usually the people who were kind of set apart or kind of consider themselves to be set apart because they were making sure that they were following the Jewish law codes, the kind of the standards for righteousness. So if you can think about that as like in a congregation, if you had, not that we have that here, but like people that were like particularly, I'm good. Listen to me. But they usually have responsibilities and things like that too, with the leadership in the synagogue. So we know roughly what's going there, but this leader, one of these synagogue rulers, one of the leaders comes. His name's Jairus, and seeing Jesus, he does what? He falls at his feet, or falls towards him, like bowing down. Is that something that a leader does? No. Not somebody not a Pharisee that's like I'm not going to bow down. But Jairus does. He comes to Jesus because he recognizes Jesus' authority, and he says to him, he implores, and so this is where we shift to the present tense. Jairus falls at Jesus' feet. He begins to plead with him a lot, asking him urgently, "My little daughter, she is at the point of death. She is near her end. I ask that you lay hands on her in order that she might be," the word, depending on how, what do you guys have with your translation there in verse 23? Made well and live. Here's a fun thing. The word that Jairus is using there, as Mark records it, is a word that has two meanings. It can be made well, but also saved. That she be saved, she be made well, she be healed, and live. And so what does Jesus do? He goes with him. So Jesus went away with him. This is what we call a divine interruption, right? Yes. You know what? Not that I've never really even thought about that one. I didn't think so. I thought it was just a proper name, but let me see because the Greek, if the Hebraism. Yeah, I'd have to do more to look it up there, but I'm not seeing anything. Yeah, you never know. I mean, usually there's some meaning with most of the names out there. Okay, so Jesus goes with Jairus, and what do you expect happens? Jesus is going. You're there in the crowd. You came to see who? Jesus. Jesus is going. What are you going to do? Follow him. Go with him. Who knows what's going to happen? I mean, you've heard what's happened in the past. He's healed people, right? And so the crowd is going, and they're going with Jesus. And keep in mind, why did Jesus have the boat in the lake for when he was meeting? It's the getaway boat, or at least the get apart boat. but everybody's there, and they're just trying to be with him. So they're crowding in on Jesus. So as Jesus is going there, the crowd is falling on. So the crowd thronged about him. Another way you could translate that is that they're rubbing against him. So it's just pressed in. I get the willies just kind of thinking about like crowds like that, right? It's just this mass of people, but they're there. They're pressing in against Jesus. And so now Mark kind of shifts, and this is past tense here. Does somebody ask a question? Is there like yes, we had our kindergarten first graders singing at 9:15, so we had a whole bunch of people ready to get in. God be praised. So yeah, it's a good crowd. So there's this crowd around Jesus, and then so Mark switches, and he's given us a little bit of background information here. So there's this woman. There's this woman who was. It says in ESV translation is that she had a discharge of blood for 12 years. And another way of saying it is that she was under the power of. If you kind of get a sense of that, under this flow of blood, so some kind of bleeding, probably like a vaginal kind of thing, not like a regularly menstrual thing, but something else is going on here. And when something like that is happening, the woman would be rendered unclean. Have we heard this before in Mark's gospel? Yeah. So if she is unclean, what is something that she would have to do? She would have to be isolated, or like what did the leper have to do when he was coming into? Announce, unclean, unclean, unclean. Because uncleanness spreads, right? So you can't be in contact with that which is unclean. So this woman has been under this for how many years? 12 years. 12 years. And there's all kinds of other biblical references to 12. I don't think that's necessarily what's going on here. I think it's 12 years, but a while. And as she has been suffering under this, being kind of pressed upon by this, if you will, she's sought treatment. So it says from the one of the things we have here that she had suffered much under many physicians. And if we kind of think about that in the context here too, she's by the hand of many doctors. She's in a worse state than she was. But could you just go to the CVS clinic back then? No. Right? The general people, you didn't have access to doctors. That wasn't a thing. It was doctors, few and far between. So you had to be pretty wealthy or pretty prominent to be able to see a doctor. So what does this tell us? If she's seen a number of physicians, she's wealthy. It's likely that she was a widow, that maybe her husband had a great wealth, and that wealth is she's been using that to go see these physicians who it's not like going to the hospital today. It's not like they have MRIs and everything else, the tools that we have, but fairly primitive kinds of things. So exercising to their knowledge what they could to try to do something to bring healing, but they haven't. And so she's suffered much. And what else do we know about her from what Mark tells us? She spent all that she had. So imagine this wealth has just been exhausted in the pursuit of what? Healing. Because with the healing would come what? Cleanness and restoration, right? So she's been suffering all these 12 years. She's been trying to do everything she could in her power to be able to do this, but she just gets worse. So, verse 27, she had heard reports about Jesus. Because what does Jesus do? He heals. He does things even for lepers. That he brings this healing that the medical sciences can't. So she's going to go. She is, imagine kind of the extent of her desperation. She's tried for 12 years, trying to do everything she could. Say, hey, I've heard about this guy. We don't know where she came from, if she was from the north up there, if she traveled to hear about Jesus, but so traveled to go see Jesus, but she hears, okay, she's there, she's there with the crowd, and she comes up with this idea, right? What's her idea? What's her plan here? We see it in verse 28. Not even if I touch him, but you just touch the tassels of his garment. So in a rabbi, if you've ever seen, right, like would have a prayer shawl, and the shawl would be flecked with these little tassels around the fringes, right? Usually like a blue kind of fringe kind of thing. She thinks if I can even touch the tassel of his garment, I'll be healed. So that's her plan. That's her thinking. So what does she do? She says here, we flip back to verse 27. She comes in the crowd from which direction? From behind. And how big is this crowd? How dense is this crowd? Packed, right? They're pressing on Jesus. And she comes in from behind. Is she going to be, unclean, 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 make way? She didn't. She's not announcing herself. She's working her way through, following in Jesus' wake, right? To come up to him and touch him. Is that something that a Jewish woman should be doing? Even a clean, right? No. That in and of itself. So she does this. She comes up from behind. She touches him. We don't know if it's just the fringe of his garment or anything like that, but she touches him. And verse 29, what happens? Bob? Immediately. She's cured. Immediately she is healed. Immediately she feels in herself, like she can sense in her body that she has been made whole. This brokenness that has afflicted her for 12 years is gone. She's been healed of this disease. The flow of blood has dried up. And with that word of mouth, right? Old school. Saul, also Paul. That one. Oh, well, I think as we later on, he hears about it too, because he's with the Pharisees. He's with that school. Like they've heard about this Jesus and what happened with him. So, but believing is different. Believing is different, right? Because that's the thing is too, as we've seen, the Pharisees. Oh, we're gonna have some fun with this one. So the Pharisees, right? They can't refute the things that Jesus is doing. Right? They themselves have seen. Like think about the man that Jesus healed, the paralytic that his friends lowered him down. The scribes of the Pharisees, they were there. They saw it, and they had a problem with what Jesus was saying. And then he heals the man and proves a point. Well, yeah, they don't acknowledge that he's God. That's kind of what their problem is like he's saying he's at the same level as God. Well, he is, but they don't believe it. So people know these things are happening, but in one point they say, well, he's in league with the devil. He's in league with Beelzebul. Jesus goes on this thing about, well, the house divided, right, against itself. It's like, no, it's not the devil working against the devil. It's the strong man, the stronger man is coming, tying up the one that's had dominion for so long and bringing rescue. So the woman has heard about this through word of mouth, right, before the original social media. And she is now healed. Now, okay, look at this, verse 30. So Jesus immediately, is how it starts with the Greek, right? Jesus immediately upon recognizing, sensing in himself that power had gone out from him, he just kind of stops, right? Immediately, he turns around in the crowd and says, what? Who touched me? Imagine the disciples, right? We're going to hear what they say. What do you mean? Everybody is touching you. They're pressing in on you, right? So there's this, like, what are you saying, right? So the disciples, all right, Jesus, who's touched you? And Jesus, so he looks around. He's very human, right? And Mark is showing us. He's very human here. Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things that we're not really going to be able to say from our, because we're human, but we're not divine, right, in that way. But we know it's a real thing for him, right? So he feels this kind of going. Maybe if you want to think about this, is entirely speculation on my part. Like imagine you get static shock or something, like you go to shake somebody's hand, on a dry day, probably like maybe something like that. It's like the power has gone out. But so he's looking around, and the disciples like, okay, what's going on now? Okay, pay attention to this. So that the woman here, right, the woman who has touched him, where we're at. So the disciples, verse 31. You see this crowd pressing around, and yet you say, "Who touched me?" Like, Jesus, what are you talking about? So Jesus keeps looking around. And like he's interested. Jesus is actually, looking to see. He cares about whoever has touched him. And so the woman, now her reaction here is that she comes with fear and trembling. Why is she coming with fear and trembling? She's not supposed to be there, for one. She should have been announcing herself, and she probably hasn't been doing that. And what else did she do? She touched him, which she wasn't supposed to do. But she comes with this fear, with this trembling, and goes up to him, and she knows what has happened. And now here's the thing: Mark uses what's called the perfect tense here. So this is a thing that happened in the past. When you're perfect tense, it happened in the past, and it remains to be the case. So it's not that just that she was healed; she is healed. She remains healed. So it's not this thing has stopped and is going to come back. It's done. She has been fully healed. So she comes up to him and she says, she tells him the whole truth. She tells everything that happened. And in the shame that would go with that, right? Especially in this crowd that's there. But what does Jesus say to her? Jesus says, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healthy, be healed from your disease." So that she is restored into what? Community, into family. She is no longer unclean. She is no longer set apart. Jesus has addressed her as daughter. Not as woman, what have you done? You shouldn't have done this. But no, she's welcome. She has been made whole by the gift of faith that God gives. Any questions kind of there before we move on to the next thing that happened there? Yeah, both. Cindy.
Well, I was just going to go in the notes. And it says, power from him does not mean Jesus performed this miracle unaware or involuntary. Who touched my garments, not an accusatory question, but an invitation for the woman to confess her faith.
There you go. So it's not Jesus. Jesus knows what's going on. He knows, like we've heard in the past, like he knows what's in the hearts of the people. Mm. Yeah. What's she doing? She's reaching out to touch him in faith. Right. Right. Hey Jesus. Hey Jesus. Heal me. Yeah. It's like, no. But it's the reaching out in faith. You're trusting that something's going to happen. Yeah. I think after his words, that's the transformation. Ben. Mm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. It's where he's present, right? It's because Jesus is there. Okay, let's keep going here. I wanted to get into chapter 6, maybe vainly, but okay. Let's see. Because where were we? What was Jesus on his way to do? Oh yeah, there was this Jairus guy. There was this leader of the synagogue that came to him and said, "My daughter is what? Not just dying, but like, she's like at the point of death." But Jesus, he stops. He takes the time with this woman that's been healed. And so, all right, Mark brings us back. So while Jesus was still speaking, these people come from the house of the synagogue leader, and they say, "Your daughter is dead. She has died. Why are you still bothering the teacher?" But Jesus, overhearing, so they're talking to this other guy. Jesus overhears this as it's being spoken to them. He says to the synagogue leader, he says to Jairus, "Don't be afraid. Do not be afraid. Only believe." Believe. All right? So Jesus allows nobody to come along with him. So the rest of the crowd gets behind. They go continue into the house of the synagogue leader there, in Jairus' house. And Peter, James, John, remember these guys? So kind of the inner circle. Keep that in mind. So these three guys come. They come into the house of the ruler of the synagogue. Imagine there's a courtyard, something there like we've heard about in the past. Jesus goes in. He sees this commotion, this clamor that's happening about people, and people are weeping and crying, and not just a little bit, but a lot, wailing loudly. Why? Little girl just died. Yeah, they're upset. Yeah, they're sad. Whether they're people that are there as members of the family, members of the household, whether there are professional mourners back then too that would come and do this. But so Jesus goes in, he goes in among this crowd, this clamor that's there, and he says to them, the present tense thing, why are you making a commotion? Why are you clamoring? Why are you weeping? The little girl is what? She has not died. This kid has not died, but is sleeping. Well, that's a ridiculous thing to say. They know. They've seen her. She's dead. Why is this important? She's just really sick. She's at the point of death. She's dead. She's real dead. She's not mostly dead. She's fully dead. She's fully dead. And Jesus says this to them. Is he denying that she's dead? No, he knows. But sleeping. I mean, in a sense, this is kind of what we think about as Christians. When we die in faith, it's the sleeping, and that's a whole longer conversation that I am not even going to venture to get into here this morning. But he says this to them, and they laugh at him. They like laughing with scorn, like you're a fool. Imagine the bitterness too. Like if they seen this little girl, and she's dead. So what does Jesus do? Well, he gets everybody out, right? Everybody outside. And so the crowd gets put out. He goes with who? With the girls, with father, mother, so Jairus, her mother, and then the inner circle of disciples. They go into where the girl is. And then what does he do? What does Jesus do? Again, because he does a lot of stuff in Mark's gospel that kind of just, what's going on? What doesn't make sense? Takes her hand. Do you touch dead people or dead things? No, not if you're Jewish, right? You don't do that because the dead is unclean. But Jesus takes her hand. He takes her hand and he says to her, and this is in Aramaic. So imagine, where does Mark get most of his information as far as we know? Peter. So who's there with Jesus? Peter, James, and John. And he says, Aramaic, Talitha Kumi. So, and Mark even gives us the translation here, to maiden, little girl, young woman, to you I say, arise. That is a resurrection word. Be lifted up. Yeah. Well, we don't know exact chronology with this, and so I can't say how quickly between this and Lazarus, but before. Well, yeah. So like is making a very clear statement about how dead Lazarus was, right? But so here, little girl, I say to you, arise. And what happens, Bob? Immediately, the girl gets up and she begins walking around. And then we have this little detail here. Mark tells us, she was 12 years old. 12 years. Didn't we just hear something about 12 years? I don't know if there's a whole lot of hay to be made with that, but I think it's a fascinating detail. If they 12 years, the woman with the flow of blood, 12 years. A long time. Think about it from the perspective of the mom and dad of this little girl who just lost this little girl. It's been part of their life for 12 years. But she's not dead anymore. She's back. Yeah. Yeah. Probably not. She would have been back in a room. Yeah. Yeah. Kind of going further to the scorn of the people that are there. Like, what do you know? You literally just walked in off the street. So now here, let's keep going on this one, right? So the girl gets up, she walks around, because she's 12 years old, and they were greatly amazed. Immediately, they were overcome with amazement. Like, so the mom, the dad, stunned, the disciples. Who is this? Peter, James, and John wondering now, so amazed what happened. So what does Jesus do? He says, okay, well, he strictly charged them. He gives them a lot of orders. Nobody talk about this. And give her some food. Give her something to eat, because she's alive. Who knows how long it's been since she's eaten, too, if she was dying. But that aside, now, going back to what Jesus said before, to the crowd outside. What did he tell them? She's not dead. She's just sleeping. And Jesus tells the parents, don't tell anybody about this. They knew she was dead. So Jesus now telling them, so if they're going to say, oh yeah, no, totally, she's sleeping. So it helps to kind of preserve, because imagine like if everybody's hearing Jesus is raising the dead, what was the crowd like before when he was healing the lepers and everything? He's not going to be able to do any of the stuff that he's supposed to be doing. Imagine the crowds then. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. 3 times. Like he lays down, right. Yeah. Yeah. And think about that too, right? So what's the authority Jesus had? How does Jesus raise her up? He just talks to her. The word that made everything out of nothing is at work. Just got a question. Okay.
So Jesus said she's sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Jesus being God, or God.
Oh, he's full God. Yeah. He's full God. Yeah. Yeah.
Would he lie?
He's not lying. Because in a sense, like when we die, it is a sleep. And there's again, I don't have the time to get into that one, but
She's sleeping. So, as far as she's not dead, when he says she's sleeping,
so
she's not really dead.
well,
That's the way I see it.
I guess that's kind of from a certain point of view. If you say it that way, think about it this way: Jesus is not lying, right? But he's also not disabusing people of their mistaken sense of things, because they think she's dead. She's dead, but when he,
But no matter how you look at it,
Mhm.
God, if he says that she's not dead,
Right.
before he does it, she's not dead.
Well, it goes to what people are meaning by death.
Why are you telling people that she's dead? You're saying he's letting them know that she's dead before.
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding what you.
What you just said,
Mhm.
you said he's appeasing the people by not telling them she's alive or she's dead.
I'm confused.
Me too, when you said that part.
So, well, there's the thing where he tells people when you're on the Jewish territories, right? So on the western side of the Sea of Galilee, telling people not to tell what they've seen or the healing that's happened, right? Because people are confused about who the Messiah is, and they have their own mistaken notions about it. And so we hear when people do hear about the things Jesus does, they come to him for the healing. They're not coming for the main reason that Jesus has come, to proclaim the breaking in of the kingdom of God, to bring the ultimate rescue. They just want the temporary rescue. With me so far? With me so far? I guess is not the same thing as yes, but okay. So, but that's the case, right? So here, and this is one of the things it's confusing about Mark's gospel. I give you that. Like, why is Jesus doing this? Well, we've seen when the word is getting out, it's actively hindering his primary work. It's getting in the way. People are continuing to have the wrong sense about who he is, about what he's come to do. So when Jesus is there talking with them, it's not that he's not lying. In a very real sense, she's asleep, in the sense that we look ahead to life does not end. And that's some of the people, like with the Sadducees, would say, well, when you die, that's it, life's done. That's it. There's no resurrection, there's no anything else after that. You're just gone. And so when Jesus says she's asleep, there's very much truth in that, is that she's not gone. She is dead. Her body has died. Well, that's the thing. That's the problem with death, is that, oh man, all right. I got like 3 minutes. we're not going to get to Mark 6. But the problem with death is that it's separating body and soul. You guys, because then this is a good thing for us just as Christians in general, right? So death, the problem is body and soul are being separated. And we're not made to have body and soul be separate. Humans are made body and soul together. And so when body and soul are apart, that's a problem. And so that's where you could say, in a certain sense, the sleeping. And then there's a whole other kind of thing that people talk about. Well, what happens to Christians when we die? Are we immediately with Jesus? Are we kind of soul sleep or something like that? And, the short version of it is that when we die, and all we know is what we can say is from Scripture, Jesus says to the thief on the cross, what? Today, you'll be with me in paradise. Not you're going to take a nap and then you're going to be with me in paradise. But no, today. And so there's a very real sense is that when we die, we're with him in heaven. But heaven is, as I tell folks, the best waiting room ever. Heaven is not your final destination. It's resurrection. It's body and soul coming back together the way that you were meant to be. And this girl who dies, and then Jesus raises her, does that mean that she's now never going to die again? No, she's going to die again. Like Lazarus too, right? Well, she died, and right. So spirit and body are separate. Okay? Not only does Jesus restore connection of body and soul, he restores the body. Because the body died. It was broken. Yeah. I admit I'm confused by that one too. Maybe not. Okay. Awaiting resurrection. I think that's a good way of thinking about it. That's why this is a good point. That as not just Christians, but people, I think, around the world generally will treat the bodies of the deceased with respect. We do so because we believe that this is a vessel. This is not even just a vessel, because I think that short sells it, but is the residence of the soul, and soul redeemed by God. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I am the resurrection and the life. Yeah. Mm. Yep. Yep. And again, when he rose, it's about the resurrection. It's about body and soul coming back together. And that people ask, well, what about, does that mean my body that's like decayed and everything? It's like, no, the God who made everything out of nothing, he can make your perfected, restored body. There's a whole conversation we can have about that one. All right, I'm out of time. We probably do need to get back over to the 11 o'clock service here. So, but we will continue with Mark 6, not next week. Next week is Palm Sunday, and we will have in here a film festival that's been put together by our kids for Christ for Kids. So I invite you to come back and join us for that. The following week, I hear, is Easter. And we will not have a discipleship time here in the fellowship hall on Easter. The Easter breakfast will happen in here, and we're going to be going from service to service to service. So starting at 6:30 a.m. every 90 minutes, we will have a service in the sanctuary. So 6:30, 8, 9:30, and 11. And then the following weekend, April 7th, we'll be in here for the assembly of the Lutheran World Relief Care Kits. So we'll be doing that in here. So it won't be for about a month or so till we get back together for our continuing exploration of Mark's gospel in Mark chapter 6. So thanks, everybody.